Greetings everyone, this is David, and today in this video I'm going to be talking about the omnipotence paradox. So the popular form of the argument goes something like this. Omnipotence means God can do anything, and then they raise the question, can God create a rock so heavy that even he cannot lift it? And whether you answer that question with yes or no, well, it's going to be disproving omnipotence because there's going to be something that God is unable to do, right? So if the answer is yes, then God cannot lift something he created. If no, then God cannot create something. And the form of this specific argument is in fact not really incorrect, but the problem with this argument is that it has really a wrong definition of omnipotence, right? So in here, the argument defines omnipotence to mean that everything has a possibility, that God possibly can do anything. But the definition of omnipotence is really just anything that is logically possible, God can actualize. That's what omnipotence really means, right? So if it's possible for God to be just, then he is going to be fully just. If it's possible for God to be wise, if it's possible for God to be incorporeal, etc., then he fully actualizes them. That's pretty much what it means. If God can create, then, he has the power to create because there's potency in creation. Now, is there potency in 2 plus 2 equaling 5? No. Why? Because it's a logical contradiction. And this is where we get into the answer to this paradox, is really that to argue that God can establish a relation between creation in which creation has some form of power over him, that scenario is just logically impossible. And this is why this argument doesn't really stand, right? In short, the existence of a stone or a rock that is so heavy that God cannot lift, the existence of such an object is just impossible and illogical. And so, in this part, in this video, I can perhaps get into the possible follow-up questions. One of them being, well, it seems like these answers, in some way, supposes that logic has power over God. But I thought you theists said that God is beyond logic. Well, just because God is beyond logic doesn't mean God can be logical. As a matter of fact, we can change the form of this question to anything, right? So, for example, can God cease to exist? No. Why? Because existence is a characteristic of God, right? It's basically saying, can God not be God? Well, obviously that's impossible. So it's the same kind of, I suppose, logic behind it is that logic is a characteristic of God, and so God cannot be contradictory. He cannot contradict his own nature, right? So 2 plus 2 cannot equal 5 because such an event will contradict the very nature of God. And this is why we will say, as for example, in my case, I'm an Orthodox Christian, we will say that, such a scenario is just impossible. There cannot be a world where 2 plus 2 equals 5. And when I say 2 plus 2 equaling 5, I'm not meaning, 5 as in like the word, but 5 as in the concept behind the word, right? And someone might ask then, well, then what is the difference between a miracle and just anything that God does, right? I mean, it seems like, aren't miracles just logic defying things? That's not really true either, right? Miracles are things that God has power over creation, right? He's almighty. He created the world, for example, and so he can modify the world according to his will. So, for example, changing water into wine. Well, God has the power. God created wine, so God can change wine. God created wine. God created water. God can change wine into water, right? Human beings cannot walk on water, but through God's power, they can. Apostle Peter can walk on water. Moses can part the sea, right? These examples. It's because of the divine power working through them. This is why prophets can also make miracles, not because they have some special voodoo magic power. It's just God's power working through them, right? So that will pretty much answer the question. The objection on miracles is that miracles, they do not contradict nature, right? They're just God's power over nature, right? The resurrection is another example. God can incarnate as man, be called Jesus Christ, be crucified, and then resurrect on the third day because he has power over his own human nature. Such events do not contradict God's nature, nor do they contradict creation itself. And the final note I want to make is that, as you can see in this image, found randomly from online, and the better question: can God create a being more powerful than Himself? If you change the word create to generate, and said that can God generate a being as powerful as Himself? Well, we as Christians will say yes. That's what the Son is, right? So God can generate a being just as powerful as Himself. If you want to watch a more detailed breakdown of this, you can watch Dr. Bo Branson's video presentation. Can God have a son? It's on it's on the YouTube channel Orthodox Shahada. That gets into a more detailed breakdown of that question. But since, according to the model ontological argument, that God is perfection Himself, there cannot be something more perfect than perfection, right? It's kind of just a categorical error. So God being perfection Himself, there cannot be, there is no logical being, there is no logical scenario where there can't be a being more powerful or more perfect than God. That's why the last question is also nonsensical. These explanations are why the omnipotence paradox is just not a good argument. If an atheist wants to make better arguments, they want to make a better argument against Christianity or any other forms of theism, I will just recommend them to actually learn about the position that they're trying to attack, and they should try to find contradictions in that position. And when I say, learn about their position, I mean just really learn about their position, not just pick and choose, out of context verses or arguments. Just generally try to learn it and see if you can find a contradiction. I think in the case of Orthodox Christianity, you can't really find something like that. And that will pretty much conclude my video. Hopefully this video was beneficial to you, and thank you all for watching. And a special thank you to all of my Patreon financiers. If you want to be one of them, you can check the link in the description below, my Patreon link in the description below, if you want to financially support me as well to see more videos. Thank you to Onan, Diet Satellite, Allison, Eddie, Father Justin, Node, Maximus, Mitch, Jonathan, Steven, Vlad, Kerry, Ignatius, Mike, Jack, Nectarius, Flood Basements, Dave, Colton, Seraphim, and Norbert. Thank you all for supporting my channel, and thank you for watching this. I will see all of you in the next video. Thank you, and may God be with you all. Goodbye.